for the government to further the cover-up, we also have means to continue to call this committee to meet to deal with this issue. If you want to consider the effect of unnecessary engagement, extra hours in the translation booths and for the clerk and for staff and for the technical staff who have to put these meetings on, for all of the analysts, the parliamentary staff, the legislative assistants, for all the members on this call. Well, there will be an increase in all of that based on the length of the filibuster offered by the government. So if government members want to continue to populate the speakers list and want to continue to offer the same points, we've heard it. You don't agree with the motion. Understood. We'll have a recorded vote. As soon as you've repeated the points that you've already asserted, and then Canadians will have an answer. Canadians will know that Parliament still works and that democracy works. It's based on the number of votes.
Today, we're going to Mr. Barrett and have him repeat his motion so that we know what we're dealing with. And hopefully some folks were able to review, as they mentioned yesterday, that they wanted to take a look at the previous motion as well as our motion now and make sure that they were well informed, particularly the new members of the committee. So
point of order. Point of
yes,
order,
Madam
Chair?
Shanahan, yes.
Yes, yeah, Chair, I appreciate the explanation that you just gave, but if you can just clarify for us where we are in the business of today, and also in the hand raising, what is the order of speakers? Is there carryover from yesterday? Is it brand new from today? If you could clarify that for us, because it was my understanding that the meeting was adjourned and it was a fresh start.
Yeah, that's correct. It'll be a fresh start today. I'll just have Mr. Barrett read his motion into the record that we had ended with yesterday, and then we will begin. And I'll give you the list of speakers right now that I have in front of me: Mr. Angus, Madam Shanahan, Mr. Dong, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Fergus, Mr. Workington, and Mr. Couric. So, Mr. Barrett, would you go ahead now, and then we'll go to the speakers list.
Point of order, Speaker. I'm just wondering, since we have a fresh start, if we can check with the clerk, are we able to move motions since we have a fresh start?
Well, we have I believe there's five motions that were moved yesterday. So we're going to return back to the motion that we were debating yesterday, and then, of course, if we get finished that quickly, we can add some more motions to the list, or we can go to the second one that was raised yesterday.
And I believe that it will actually, I have a motion to amend the routine motion that we passed yesterday, and specifically to add a clause that in future, if we're going to call a meeting, we'll have 24 hours notice at least, just because that, I had to cancel a lot of appointments to be here today, and, receiving a notice in the morning and expect all members to be available at 1 o'clock. I think it's a little bit of tall order. I think if you would indulge me to allow me to move a motion to change the routine order.
We'll do that when we come back to the motions of the business of the day. Absolutely. Yeah.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Angus.
Well, Chair, to what my colleague had said, we had to change a lot of stuff in my personal life and family life to be at this meeting because we're dealing with an undealt with motion. It's not my understanding that we're here then to carry on ordinary business and go through all the other motions that really belong in the normal day. This is an extraordinary meeting. So we're here to deal with something that had to be dealt with because it has to deal with the documents. But I'm certainly very uncomfortable with this idea that then we'll just turn it into a regular meeting and go as long as we want. And as far as changing the standing orders, the routine procedure, I mean, that was agreed on yesterday. We don't get to go back and rewrite them every time we don't like something at a committee. That would, I think, turn us into a bit of a monkey show.
Mr. Angus, first off, I completely respect and appreciate your point. I know that everybody had to reschedule things, and so for that, you have my sincere regrets. I wanted to try and finish this motion. I only mentioned the other motions in the sense that I'm the servant of the committee. So, if there's a majority that wants to move on past that, then I'm here to serve. But the primary pursuit today is what you said, is to deal with that motion and hopefully get the request in, because we don't have those documents right now. Get the request in so there's some action taken while we're gone for Thanksgiving, because right now we have no action going on for the committee. So
Chair, on that same point of order.
Yes, Madam Shanahan.
Yes, I too appreciate the point brought forward by both my colleague Mr. Dong and Mr. Angus, and I think the idea, and I hear where you're coming from, is we're all dealing with new circumstances. There's a lot going on. I too had to cancel a number of meetings this afternoon, both virtually and in the House. And I'm sure I'm not alone in the constituency, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in that regard. And so maybe some clarification from the chair, because including the fact that we have restricted resources. I think we started off on a good note, and I was very pleased. Chair, you have a sense of humor, and you brought us along, and I greatly appreciate that. But this seems to be upsetting the apple cart, and Mr. Angus is I think has a good point in saying that if this is an extraordinary meeting, that the business at hand should be dealt with, I think, in a way that respects all the members here. So I think that's the point that we're trying to get across. Thank you.
Understood. Mr. Fergus, was it on the same point of order?
No, it's on a different one, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to have to beg I hope with the agreement, if they had noticed, of either the clerk or Mr. Angus or even our analyst.
Sorry, point of order. Mr. Fergus, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I'm not sure if it's.
I'm sorry. They asked me to move my boom mic away from my mouth because it was a little bit too poppy. But is this okay for interpreters? Because I don't want our interpreters to.
I can hear you now. Can everybody else hear Mr. Fergus okay?
I'm certain you can hear me, but I just want to make sure that this is okay for the interpreters.
Okay.
Great, thank you. But if I can just beg the collaboration I hope the clerk or the analyst or Mr. Angus had noticed, I came on early and I noticed that Ms. Shanahan had her hand up. I put my hand up second using the raise hand feature. Then when I forget where it was, but someone was just asked to test to see if it works, and my hand went off automatically. It wasn't me who did it. So I put my hand back up, but I don't know if anybody noticed that I actually had my hand up second.
Okay, Mr. Fergus, we're wrestling with all those kind of technical difficulties. If you actually registered it before I gavelled the meeting in, then it probably would go back to zero because the meeting hadn't started until we actually officially gavelled in.
I didn't notice anybody else's flip off. It was just mine.
Okay. Okay, I will. You are number 5 right now, Mr. Fergus. I don't know how to resolve it other than leave it in that. Speakers list. I'll just get Mr. Barrett to repeat his motion, and then we'll go to the speakers list.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. And I, like our colleagues, we all have things to do today, and so having already spent quite a bit of time on this yesterday, I don't think there's going to be any surprises where folks vote. So, if the meeting's 30 minutes or if it ends on Monday morning, my wife said she'll keep the turkey warm for me, and so she'd be happy to see me later this afternoon. But I'm ready to do this until it's resolved, because we're into a second meeting dealing with the same motion. It states that pursuant to Standing Orders 1081 A, an order of the committee do issue to Speaker Spotlight for a copy of all records pertaining to speaking appearances arranged since October 14th, 2008 for Justin Trudeau, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, Margaret Trudeau, and Alexandre Trudeau, including in respect of each speaking appearance, an indication of the fee provided, any expenses that were reimbursed, and the name of the company, organization, person, or entity booking it, which had been originally ordered to be produced on July 22nd, 2020 by the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics, provided that these documents shall be provided to the clerk of this committee within 24 hours of the adoption of this motion, and that the documents be reviewed in camera.
We'll make the corrections, but right now, Mr. Angus has the floor, and we'll go through, and everybody will have an opportunity to speak. So you might be at a place, one or two places, because of this glitch, but you will have the opportunity to speak fulsomely.
Okay, I'm just telling everyone what I saw. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Angus.
Mr. Angus.
Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. We are in the second day of discussing a motion that should have been moved very smoothly through our first meeting, because this is a motion regarding a decision that was made by this committee last July regarding the obtaining of documents regarding the payments that were made to the Trudeau family through their work with We. Many of the sitting members of this committee were on that last committee and voted for it. We voted for a very clear set of rules around it to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. It was based on a respect that we have a duty as parliamentarians to call for evidence when necessary. And it's also recognized that we need to have an agreement to make sure that that evidence is protected and the privacy of individuals protected. So it was a fairly straightforward motion, and yet we've seen nothing but obstruction from the Liberals, an obstruction that began when the day we were supposed to receive these documents, the Prime Minister shut Parliament down. So the documents, is my understanding, is that they are in the hands of the committee clerk. We have these documents, but we are not being able to do our work because of this Liberal obstruction. And I think this is very, very unfortunate. So why do these documents matter? Well, the issue is that the question of conflict of interest of the Prime Minister, who's under investigation right now, that the We group, particularly the Kielburger brothers, had built a close relationship with the Trudeau family that included financial payments. And this was highly problematic because under Section 5 of the Conflict of Interest Act, the Prime Minister has the obligation to keep his family business in order so that he does not find himself in a conflict. And everything about this scandal is about that conflict. So why do these documents matter? Well, when the Kielburgers were first asked whether Margaret Trudeau and Sasha Trudeau were being paid, they said nobody got paid. And we know that many high-profile speakers, such as Julie Black and Theo Fleury, gave their time to We and did not get paid. It was then shown that what the Kielburgers and the We group were saying was false, that Margaret Trudeau had been paid well over $300,000, and the payments with Justin Trudeau's brother amounted to over $500,000. So that discrepancy needs to be accounted for. When we sat at the Finance Committee, we asked the chair of the former chair of We, who had been fired by the Kielburgers, Michelle Douglas, about why the Trudeau family were being paid this amount of money when nobody else was paid. And what Michelle Douglas said was extraordinary. She said that the board of directors had specifically asked the Kielburger brothers if these payments were being made to the Trudeaus, and they were told, no money has been paid. So that was false. When we asked the Kielburger brothers to explain this discrepancy, they claimed at the finance hearings that Margaret Trudeau and Sacha Trudeau were not paid for public speaking, but were paid for the ancillary events afterwards. That's the corporate sponsorship events. So the question of hiring the Prime Minister's family to work corporate sponsorship events put the Prime Minister in a pretty clear issue of conflict of interest.
Mr. Angus, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have some information that may impact your presentation there that I don't think was clear to the members before, that we are not actually in possession of these documents. They were requested to be sent on August 19th, and on August 18th, the House was prorogued. So we actually have to demand those documents once more. Wanted to be clear on that.
Well, thank you for that clarification. My understanding was that we were in possession of the documents. However, our committee had given instructions to obtain those documents, and the effort to get those documents was interfered with by the Prime Minister's decision to prorogue. So I think the issue remains a serious question of the interference in the work of our committee. So the other issue that came out from the documents that were received, the 5,000 pages of documents relating to the decision to award upwards of $900 million of public money to the We Group, was that in those documents we saw that in the pitch to senior ministers and senior government officials, the Kielburger brothers included photographs of the Prime Minister's family.
Chair, sorry, point of order. I'm not hearing Mr. Angus.
We didn't know.
Yeah, we'll wait to see if he gives a better connection, and then we'll have him just repeat those last couple of sentences.
That raises serious questions and of conflict of interest that the Prime Minister has been put in, because not only were the family members being paid by the Kielburg using photos of
Chair, point of order, please.
Yeah.
Can Mr. Angus repeat basically the last 3 minutes?
Yeah, Mr. Angus, I don't know if you're in a position where somebody else is using your Wi-Fi or whatever, but we just lost you for about 4 or 5 sentences there, and I just want to make sure that your testimony is on record. And it was totally garbled by the glitch in the internet.
How is this? Are we on? Can you hear me?
I can hear your audio very well, and that's the prime thing. So if you want to go back a few sentences and begin over, that'd be great.
Well, I'm moving towards my conclusion here, but in the 5,000 pages of documents we received, it was really striking that in the pitch to the senior cabinet, senior officials, the Kielburger brothers included photographs of the Prime Minister's family, which I think is very shocking. What I think is more shocking is that in those 5,000 pages of documents, nobody said that this was problematic. We do know that some civil servants noted the fact that the Prime Minister's family, the people who had been paid, were being included in the pitch to get this contract. But at no point did anyone say that this was a serious conflict of interest, that this breached very obvious rules and limitations. So to my Liberal colleagues who are obstructing the access to these documents, I put it to them in a very simple manner. If the statements that the Kielburgers made are true in regards to the payments that were made, those documents will verify that. If the documents verify that, we have nothing else to say. We move on. We move on to other issues. But being that we have felt through our investigation of that we have not gotten clear answers, we need to be able to verify whether or not these payments are in the manner that they described. Were there other payments? Were these payments involving other matters? We need to know that. We have the protections within this committee to make sure that these documents are not going to be just thrown out in the public. But if there are serious contradictions in testimony, then it is incumbent upon us as parliamentarians to find out and get these answers. So the fact that we've already voted to obtain these documents, we've already voted to have clear provisions in place for the protection of these documents to protect the private lives of individuals who may not have done anything, felt they have done anything wrong, but they are very much part of this larger scandal because of their financial connections to the Kielburgers. We need to verify and get these answers. So I know this debate may go on as long as the Liberals want to filibuster and shut us down, but the work of Parliament must be able to return to the Canadian people and say, we did due diligence. We looked into how this massive amount of public money in the middle of the worst economic and financial crisis in memory was going to be hived off and given to a group that has very, very close personal and financial relations with the Prime Minister's family. We have that obligation. All of us from all parties have that obligation to know whether or not the evidence and the claims that have been made at committee is accurate so that we, in the end, can provide an accurate report to Parliament. So I'm asking my Liberal colleagues to do the right thing and stop this obstruction that they are now carrying on into their second day.
These people are crazy. This is going to be a disaster.
Barrett.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. So we're an hour into the second meeting of this committee to deal with the ordering the production of these documents. This committee previously ordered them, and the group came back to us, the Speaker Spotlight came back to us and said they needed more time for all of the reasons stated. You know, COVID, the time it would take. The committee granted them their request. And it was an additional 3 weeks, so a month total. And on the eve of the deadline requested by the organization, the Prime Minister shut down Parliament. And he shut down Parliament to avoid accountability. It wasn't for a reset. It wasn't for COVID. There was all kinds of things that could have been done. All of the good things that Liberal members are talking about that this committee could be doing, we could have been doing them for the last 6 weeks. Well, the sitting calendar said we only would have sat the last Monday in September. Well, that's a choice of the government. No, we could have sat in this format by the will of the House. We could have done that. The committee could decide that we would have continued to meet. So this was all on the table. This all could have been done. But we're dealing with a situation during a pandemic where the government tried an extraordinary power grab to be able to tax and spend without parliamentary oversight or approval from March of 2020 until December of 2021. That was the first real volley from this government in dealing with this pandemic, but still got support and much needed help from opposition parties in improving the measures designed to help Canadians.
She might be.
And Madam Clerk, I think your mic's
Sorry.
hot there. That's okay. So here we are after Parliament was prorogued, shut down, and looking to resume the work that we were doing before. These documents were prepared. They can be ordered. It is the right of this committee to request them. The motion states that they will be reviewed in camera. I can't speak to the integrity of any other member on this call, but I believe that members will act honorably. And so if all members on this call agree that they will act honorably, as will I, then there is no problem. And if there is an issue that arises, as is the case with any committee, with any dealing on Parliament Hill, any breach, well, then those are investigated and then those are dealt with. And the appropriate rules, policies, and laws that are in place are used. But all of that is a distraction. We have an organization that paid members of the Prime Minister's family at least $500,000, and then that Prime Minister gave that organization an agreement to administer $500 million. $500,000 for $500 million. Well, Canadians are worried about paying their bills and choosing whether to heat their homes or feed their families this fall. It's about accountability. It's the obligation of all members. The chair spoke yesterday about how committees afford the opportunity for members who aren't in cabinet to drive their agenda. And it is the responsibility of all members who aren't in cabinet to hold the executive accountable. Now, the opposition parties have put forward measures to do that, and the government members, the Liberal members, have indicated they're likely to vote against. That's fine. And everyone is going to speak, and I believe very much that members should all have their say. I think it's fundamental. But what I expect to see happen is that we'll get through this hour, and there will be members of the Liberal Party who will have spoken at great length, and will seek to talk the clock out, and will look to speak a second time or a third time. Yesterday, very reasonable amendments were proposed by myself. A half a loaf was proposed by Mr. Angus from the NDP. I was only too happy to further that proposal that would have checked the boxes that have been laid out by the Liberal members. Well, let's suspend, let's discuss. The suspension happened, and then we got right back into the same talking points from the Liberal members. If you don't support the motion, vote against it, but have the courage of your convictions. And not having a majority on the committee, as was the case during the previous ethical scandals and involving corruption in this Liberal government, this Prime Minister twice having been found guilty of breaking ethics laws, and during the SNC-Lavalin scandal using majorities on committee to shut them down. Now the government doesn't have a majority. Canadians elected a majority opposition. And so it's not for the government to use tricks to try and dodge accountability. You have to take your lumps. If you play silly games, you win.